guy. Oh, thank you. It's the highlight of my day.
He's a keeper, Greg. He's a keeper. He's a keeper.
Great.
That's cute, Greg.
That's cute.
Yeah, Mom's at the grocery store right now, so he's gonna hang out for a little bit.
Did Brian Simmerly let you borrow that shirt the baby's wearing?
Yeah, I got it on loaner. It's on deposit.
Hey, Mary Kate Costello, you could be president today after arranging for the bulk pickup. I think people were like going to nominate you to run the world.
Oh no, look, I'm still keeping my fingers crossed. Everything's getting picked up, so it's looking good though. It's
good. Nice work.
There was a lot out. There was a lot.
There's a lot.
I know. They're still getting it.
Yes, they were bringing in. Well, they'll tell you, but the mayor will tell you. But it's.
Well, thank you.
Oh, I was relieved. Whew. I was extra nervous this morning driving in, looking at all these tree lawns. They were.
Oh, yeah.
So far so good though.
Good to hear.
Thanks, Liz, for setting us up.
No problem. So we are good on YouTube, it looks like.
Yeah, so I looked at that. So, and then what did I didn't even see what you sent email?
Who am I hearing and not seeing?
Oh, good. Yeah, keep telling me, oh, bro, get the word out there. You don't do this all in one time. I don't just be like a check. Get the word out. Let's see what people are saying.
So looks like we have everyone for the caucus. And my YouTube is just saying it's waiting.
Yeah, you're
So I'm not. I want to make sure it's showing.
No reason to apologize. This is I'm getting close to stopping. It's a moving target.
Okay, it is live, so we're good.
Ready to start caucus?
Yep.
Hey, council, is everyone good with all the minutes of the meetings, the 2 regular meetings and a special meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
One of them I saw, line 217, it has labels Cooney as Director Cooney rather than Mayor. I think it's just a simple error.
Which set?
Line 217, whatever the first one is, I think. I can't remember the date.
We got a promotion, Greg?
Yeah.
From the March 2nd or March
2nd.
March 2nd. Oh, wait. So are you going to make a motion to amend those, or do you?
Sure, I can do that.
Can you hear me, Greg?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You just, let me see what that thing looks like.
What exactly was the typo?
Yeah, it just mislabeled it where it says, instead of saying Mayor Cooney, it just says Director Cooney. Nothing drastic, and just stuck out.
And that's on the March 2nd
Yes.
minutes?
Or is it?
That's the first day, yeah.
Okay, with the exception of that typo, is there anything else? Anyone, any other issues with the minutes? Greg, during the regular meeting, you can make a motion to.
You don't have Maureen on there. You don't have Medic. Oh, they're on there.
Pardon?
Oh, these don't have, I'm one screwed up. To be talking to you, you're talking to me.
There was a question.
Yeah, Greg, you want to make the motion during the regular meeting? To amend
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
All right, very good, thank you. Okay, we have one committee report for the evening. Sarah, Local Government and Community Services.
Yeah, have one.
Got it.
Okay, thanks.
You're all set?
Yep, I'm good to go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's legislation for first reading. Bridget, you have two ordinances.
I have two
Set
ordinances,
with those. Legislation for second reading. Sarah, you have an ordinance and a resolution.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, then we have quite a bit of legislation for passage without three reads. Bill, you have three ordinances. Bill, you there?
Yes,
You're all set on your three ordinances for passage without three readings?
yes. Can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You're good?
Yes, good.
Okay, very good. Okay, Bridget, then you have four ordinances for passage without three reads as well.
correct.
You're all set, okay.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, Brian, do you have anything for roundtable?
I do not.
Bill, do you have anything for roundtable?
Yes, I did you an email me in reference to at the track, and I emailed the mayor and the service foreman reference to checking on the issues. And I received a response from the service division. They took care of the refuse containers, but I haven't heard any dispositions reference to my other inquiries. I assume they'll be discussed this evening. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Maureen, do you have anything for roundtable?
Yeah, I guess just with the refuse containers, I know this is a constant thing because I've talked to the service department a bit about it. I got a complaint from a neighbor, and then he's citing how so many other neighbors, their garbage cans are visible from the street. And as I'm walking around, it's probably something that, I don't know if just in our newsletter is something, we just put out a reminder of what, you know, the expectations are, that people are expected to make sure that their refuse containers are not visible from the street. Obviously, some people, theirs don't stand out quite so terribly as others, but I would venture to guess a lot of people aren't even aware of that. You know, they do it just to keep things tidy, but other people, I think, just leave them out on the side of their house or still in their driveway and just are basically unaware that they are expected to tuck them away. It just seems to be, that's kind of the big thing I've gotten a complaint about. So I thought if we just put a little reminder out there, it might be helpful.
Excellent. I need something to put into the newsletter.
There
I
you go.
appreciate it.
So Kathleen just asked for submission, so it's very timely, Maureen. Thank you.
Oh, okay. We're probably hearing from the same people. But I wasn't gonna mention it till Fayon's got their cans back in their garage.
Good timing.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, do you have anything?
Not tonight.
Thank you. Bridget,
No, nothing tonight.
thank you. Greg,
No,
Liz, do you have anything?
I just wanted to mention real quick, we all got an email from Chief Upperman this morning about the virtual meetings guidance that they put out, and I just wanted to give everybody an update on that. Those guidelines from the FBI or whatever, those links came out right after the whole security thing with Zoom was like the last week of March. So over that weekend, before we even, before we even had our meeting, they had dealt with a whole bunch of those security issues that they had. But also some of them are not necessarily bad for us. The fact that people can actually view our stuff, that's actually what we want people to be able to do. So that really wasn't a security concern so much for us, except for, people coming in bombing your meeting, which we have not had that issue, nor do I anticipate us having that issue. But just wanted to let everybody know that yes, they came out. They have addressed several issues. If anybody wants like the specifics that they addressed, I will gladly send those to you because I've seen it in a couple different places. So that was all I had. I just didn't want you guys to think we're like using this thing, and there's still a lot of here. And I did put an email out to the clerks first thing this morning. Everybody that use Zoom, which is probably 99% of all the governments, are saying that their department is either watching it or they're just continuing to use them, and they're not giving out their meeting ID and only allowing people to look at them at YouTube. So I guess if we have an issue, we can do that. But right now they can still get on both of them. So that's it.
Thanks, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
I received a request from Mayor Cooney that an executive session be held this evening after the meeting to address personnel and employment matters as outlined in Article 15, Sections 1 and 4 of the Charter. Specifically, Section 1, to consider compensation of a public employee and official. Section 4, preparing for or conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. The mayor's also requested that Director Single, Costello, Riley be included in the executive session. So after this evening's meeting, I will call for a motion to adjourn into executive session.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Just
Mayor.
to chime in behind Mike, on Mike behind that, if everyone could please leave this meeting, it'll still be going on because it's set to go on. I actually am going to be putting a sign up for this and the YouTube just saying that we're in executive session and that we'll resume once that's over, just so if someone clicks on during that time, they're like, what is going on? They'll know. And just for everyone to leave, just to ensure that there's no mics on for that executive session. And that it's as secure as it can possibly be, but then you can just log back into the regular meeting once we leave the executive session, because it'll still be going.
We just click back on the link again? We just click
Yes.
back on the link again? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Good. All right, also, I'm going to be assigning the topic of the Board of Control to the Local Government and Community Services Committee tonight as well. Mayor, do you have anything you want to add before we get ready for the regular meeting?
No, I'd like to thank Monica and Mary Kay, and I'll talk about it at the meeting, but for their efforts in getting the micro grant program up and running, and the finance department for their help as well. We've had a number of applications already, and they've gone through those, and we're hoping to get some funds distributed here shortly. And we're also trying to get some more money from the county, which we feel is, would, fall into this program. So I appreciate all their efforts. I appreciate all your support. We've heard from a lot of these businesses. They've, they're in a tough spot, and they're waiting on, the various federal programs to kick in. So I appreciate, again, all your support for that.
Thanks, Mayor. Director Costello, Director Riley, I don't know who else is on. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
I do not. No, I'm good. Thank you.
I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to thank Liz real fast for all the logistics of the Zoom for the regular meeting and the executive session and the YouTube and everything. It's done a great job as usual.
Yeah, thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if we have nothing else, then we'll adjourn caucus and we'll get the regular meeting started in about 12 minutes.
Just so everybody knows, occasionally getting a little message. My internet connection is unstable. So it's kind of just where I have a delay in the message. So if I seem like I'm zoning out, it's not me, it's my computer, okay? That's what's happening. So,
Maureen,
I'm
you
near
might
my
want to
route.
try to restart it in this 12 minutes. I'm going to try to restart mine because I got the same thing. And I found if I restart and come back in, it gets better. So I'm
Okay,
12 minutes to try to make sure that we're good.
will do. Thanks for the suggestion, Sarah. Is this working, Liz?
It is, yes. I just have it on the screen that we're not coming back till 7 in case people are
Okay.
wondering why it's quiet.
Thanks. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Liz,
Yes.
okay, just wanted to make sure you could still hear me.
Yep. I just have this up in case anyone comes on and wonder why there's nothing going on. Hi, Mike. We're here. We're just quiet because it's not 7 o'clock yet. That's why you just see that screen.
Hey, Liz, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I could get on without any technical difficulties. So, but
You're good to go.
everything was fine. Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was curious. Does anybody know, is Dairy View still going to be opening? It looked like they had me to believe like there's nothing on their windows. Are they just doing spring cleaning or is it closed?
We
Yeah.
sent a communication to them. We haven't heard back yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my kids were concerned. They were thinking I needed another side gig, you know? Could employ all of Yosta.
Oh my gosh. That would be quite the fundraiser.
Yeah, yeah.
Although I know one participant who might eat all the profits.
Yeah, that's what they seem to be into their ice cream.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what a negative, a price of oil at a negative, like $36 a barrel or something? What does that mean? Does anybody have any idea?
Really? No, I'd not heard that.
I
Yeah,
saw the headline today, but I haven't had a chance to dig in. I
yeah.
think it's
So
interesting to read into.
I had heard, Michael, that the last time it was trading, it was down at $70 a barrel, and today it's trading for $5 a barrel.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard the report I just heard was on Marketplace, and they said negative
It's
dollars.
down to a negative number.
I don't know how that is possible. But
I've never heard that. So they will pay us for oil? Is that what they're saying, I guess?
turn your car into them. Yeah, no, yeah, they'll give you oil and gas for free,
Wild.
and
I've
pay you
never
to
heard
take
of
it,
that.
maybe. Yeah, that's what it is. Pay you to take it. It's strange times, huh?
It is very odd.
Can you hear me?
Somebody wake Bill up.
Seven o'clock. Is everyone ready?
Ready?
I'm ready.
You
Ready?
hear me, Liz?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm not getting a video, but that's fine.
Who was that just talking?
Mary Kay.
Okay, no, I just had council. Actually, I'm going to put you back up because you are on the dais. I'm sorry.
It doesn't, no, that's, you can keep it that way.
Okay, the regular meeting of the Council of the City of Fairview Park for Monday, April the 20th, 2020 is now called to order. We have a moment of silent reflection. Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Simmerly.
Here.
Mr. Minnick. Mrs. Adler.
Here.
Mr. Kilbane.
Here.
Mrs. Waring.
Here.
Mrs. King.
Here.
Mr. Berger.
Present.
All right, the chair will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of council, March 20th, 2020.
March 20th, March 2nd.
March 2nd, 2000.
All right.
Thank you.
So there's a typo on that on line 217. It lists,
After the motion is moved and seconded. Have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilman Berger?
yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend the minutes for March 2nd. It says Director Cooney at one point rather than Mayor Cooney.
Which line was that again?
217.
Okay, so moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
The clerk, please call a roll on the motion to amend the minutes of the regular meeting of council, March 2nd, 2020.
Mr. Simmerly.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick. Mrs. Adler.
Yes.
Mr. Kilbane.
Yes.
Mrs. Waring.
Yes.
Mrs. King.
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Motion carries. The minutes are amended. Will the clerk please call roll on motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of March the 2nd, 2020 amended?
Mr. Simmerly.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick. Mr. Minnick. Okay.
Yes.
Mrs. Adler.
Yes.
Mr. Cobain.
Yes.
Mrs. Waring.
Yes.
Mrs. King.
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Okay, the amended minutes of the meeting of March the 2nd, 2020 pass. Will the clerk please call roll on the approval of the regular minutes of the meeting of March 16th, 2020?
Mr. Simmerly.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Yeah, that motion carries. Minutes are approved. And will clerk please also call roll on the approving the minutes of the special meeting of council of April 13th, 2020.
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Okay, the minutes are approved. We'll now have the sole committee report for the evening, local government and community services, Councilwoman Waring.
Well,
I'm not hearing Sarah.
Can you hear me now?
Unmute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ah, yay. Okay, thank you. The Local Government and Community Services Committee met on Monday, April 13th, beginning at 7 p.m. In attendance was Council, Mayor Cooney, City Directors Costello, Upperman, Rappin, and Sullivan, and Long. The committee discussed two related pieces of legislation, Ordinance 20-10 and Resolution 2004. Ordinance 20-10 authorizes Mayor Cooney to enter into an agreement with the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court in connection with the Community Diversion Program. This program establishes legal mechanisms to divert complaints before they are filed in criminal court action. The city has participated in this program in the past and has had good success with it. Council made a motion to move this legislation to second reading and return it to committee, which passed 7-0. Resolution 2004 is related to Ordinance 20-10 as it appoints a volunteer hearing officer to Community Diversion Program. The city is recommending Attorney John Castell serve as volunteer hearing officer, and he has agreed to do so. Council made a motion to move this legislation to second reading and return it to committee, and that passed 7-0. The Local Government and Community Services Committee concluded at 7:14 p.m.
Thank you, Councilwoman Waring. Okay, we will begin the legislative agenda for the evening.
Sorry, my Google app thinks I'm talking to it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, yes. Ordinance 20,
We will begin the legislative agenda for this evening with legislation on first reading. Councilwoman King.
Thank you, Council President. I would like to place two ordinances before council for first reading.
Okay, would the clerk please assign numbers and read the titles?
sure. Ordinance 2012, requested by Mayor Patrick Cooney, sponsored by Councilwoman King. An ordinance establishing the Retiree Accrued Benefits Fund and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 2013, requested by Mayor Patrick Cooney, sponsored by Councilwoman King. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with GoToIt Group for professional support services for the city's computer systems and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Ordinances 2012 and 2013 were both placed on first reading and assigned to the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now have legislation on second reading. Councilwoman Waring.
Thank you. I would like to place Ordinance 20-10 and Resolution 2004 before council for second reading.
Thank you. Would the clerk please read the titles?
Ordinance 2010, requested by Mayor Patrick J. Cooney, sponsored by Councilwoman Waring. An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Fairview Park to enter into an agreement with the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court in connection with a community diversion program to address juvenile misdemeanor and status offenders in the city of Fairview Park, establishing a community diversion program fund as a special revenue fund, and declaring an emergency. Resolution 2004, requested by Mayor Patrick Cooney, sponsored by Councilwoman Waring. A resolution to express the need and desire of the city of Fairview Park, Ohio, for the appointment of a volunteer hearing officer to preside at community diversion program hearings.
Thank you. Ordinance 2010 and Resolution 2004 are both placed on second read, and both are returned to the Local Government and Community Services Committee. Okay, we will now have audience input on legislation that is up for passage this evening. Is there any input from any audience out there on legislation that is up for passage this evening? Any questions? All right. We will now have legislation up for passage without three readings. Councilman Minnick.
This is an ordinance before council for emergency passage.
Okay, would the clerk please read the title?
Ordinance 2014, requested by Mary Kay Costello, Director of Public Service and Development, sponsored by Councilman Minnick. An ordinance authorizing McKay Engineering and Surveying Company, city engineer, to prepare plans and specifications and provide construction administration, inspection, and bidding services for the targeted repair of city sidewalks and curb ramps and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilman Minnick.
Thank you. I move the charter provision, Rule 49, requiring that legislation be read at 3 separate meetings be suspended and then be placed before council for emergency passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick, Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Councilman Minnick.
Assessment in ordinance 20-14, placed on final passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Prior to call for passage of ordinance 2014, is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the passage of ordinance 2014?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Ordinance 2014 passes. Councilman Minnick. Did everyone get that?
Mike, Bill, you need to come closer to your speaker or something. Like we can hear your echo, but we couldn't hear you.
Did you try that again, Bill?
Okay. Thank you, Council President. I'd like to place an ordinance before council for emergency passage.
Will the clerk please read the title and assign a number? I'm sorry. Assign a number and read the title.
Ordinance 2015, requested by Mary Kay Costello, Director of Public Service and Development, sponsored by Councilman Minnick. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service and Development to advertise for bids and the mayor to enter into a contract with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder as determined by the Board of Control to repair unsafe and deteriorating sidewalks and curb ramps and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilman Minnick.
Thank you. I move the charter provision, Rule 49, requiring the legislation be read at 3:30 suspended and then be placed before council for emergency passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
The motion carries. Councilman Minnick?
In reference to committee be dispensed with and ordinance 20-15 be placed on final passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick, Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
The motion carries. Prior to call for passage of ordinance 2015, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on passage of ordinance 2015?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Ordinance 2015 passes. Councilman Minnick?
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to place another ordinance before council for emergency passage.
Will the clerk please assign a number and read the title?
Ordinance 2016, requested by Mary Kay Costello, Director of Public Service and Development, sponsored by Councilman Minnick. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, to execute the Moraine Road Guardrail Project, on behalf of the City of Fairview Park, hereinafter known as the Local Public Agency, or LPA, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilman Minnick?
Thank you. I move the charter provision in Rule 49 requiring the legislation be read at 3:70 be spent before council for emergency passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Motion carries. Councilman Minnick?
Dispensed with and ordinance 20-16 be placed on final passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Motion carries. Prior to call for passage of ordinance 2016, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on passage of ordinance 2016?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2016 passes. Councilwoman King?
Thank you, Council President. I would like to place an ordinance before council for emergency passage.
Thank you. Will the clerk assign a number and read the title, please?
Ordinance 2017, requested by Mary Kay Costello, Director of Public Service and Development, sponsored by Councilwoman King, co-sponsored by Councilman Minnick. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation, or ODOT, to execute the West 210th Street resurfacing project, on behalf of the City of Fairview Park, hereinafter known as the Local Public Agency, or LPA, and declaring an emergency.
Councilwoman King.
I move that Charter Provision and Rule 49 requiring that legislation be read at 3 separate meetings be suspended and that it be placed before council for emergency passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick, Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Motion carries. Councilwoman King.
I move that Rule 53 requiring reference to committee be dispensed with and Ordinance 2017 be placed on for final passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Motion carries. Prior to call for passage of ordinance 2017, is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on passage of ordinance 2017?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick, Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Ordinance 2017 passes. Councilwoman King.
Thank you, Council President. I would like to place an ordinance before council for emergency passage.
Thank you. Would the clerk please assign a number and read the title?
Ordinance 2018, requested by Mary Kay Costello, Director of Public Service and Development, sponsored by Councilwoman King. An ordinance authorizing the city engineer to prepare plans and specifications and provide bidding services for the resurfacing of West 210th Street from Mastic Road to Lorraine Road and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilwoman King.
I move that Charter Provision and Rule 49 requiring that legislation be read at 3 separate meetings be suspended and that it be placed before council for emergency passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Motion carries. Councilwoman King.
I move that Rule 53 requiring reference to committee be dispensed with and Ordinance 2018 be placed on final passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick, Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger,
Yes.
Motion carries. Prior to call for passage of ordinance 2018, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on passage of ordinance 2018?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick, Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Kilbane,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Ordinance 2018 passes. Councilwoman King.
I would like to place an ordinance before council for emergency passage.
Thank you. Will the clerk please assign a number and read the title?
Ordinance 2019, requested by Mary Kay Costello, Director of Public Service and Development, sponsored by Councilwoman King. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement for construction, administration, and inspection services with an Ohio Department of Transportation pre-qualified consultant for the resurfacing of West 210th Street from Mastic Road to Lorraine Road as determined by the Board of Control and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilwoman King.
I move that charter provision in Rule 49 requiring that legislation be read at 3 separate meetings be suspended and that it be placed before council for emergency passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Kilbane,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Councilwoman King.
I move that Rule 53 requiring reference to committee be dispensed with and ordinance 2019 be placed on final passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Kilbane,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Sarah, I didn't hear you. Councilwoman
Yes.
Waring, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Prior to call for passage of ordinance 2019, is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on passage of ordinance 2019?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Kilbane,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Ordinance 2019 passes. Councilwoman King.
Thank you, Council President. I would like to place one final ordinance up for council for emergency passage.
Will the clerk please assign a number and read the title?
Ordinance 2020, requested by Mary Kay Costello, Director of Public Service and Development, sponsored by Councilwoman King, co-sponsored by Councilman Minnick. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service and Development to advertise for bids and the mayor to enter into a contract with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder as determined by the Board of Control for the resurfacing of West 210th Street from Mastic Road to Lorraine Road and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilwoman King.
I move that charter provision in Rule 49 requiring that legislation be read at 3 separate meetings be suspended and that it be placed before council for emergency passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Kilbane,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Councilwoman King.
I move that Rule 53 requiring reference to committee be dispensed with and ordinance 2020 be placed on final passage.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on the motion?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minute,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. Kane,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
The motion carries. Prior to call for passage of ordinance 2020, is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, will the clerk please call roll on passage of ordinance 2020?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minute,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Ordinance 2020 passes. And that concludes our legislative agenda for this evening. We'll now have reports and communications from the mayor and his directors. Mayor Cooney, if you're ready.
Thank you, Council President Kilbane. And thank you to Council for your passage of these ordinances. It's going to allow us to get started at some, some exciting projects. So we appreciate that. I want to let everybody know that the state of the community address has been postponed until late August. I don't have a specific date. Superintendent Wagner and I have discussed a few possibilities, and once I get confirmation from him, we'll let everybody know. The May 16th Shredding and Household Hazardous Waste Day has been rescheduled for Saturday, August 8th. We also have on Saturday, September 19th, another Shredding and Household Hazardous Waste date, and that is still on the calendar. If there are any changes to that, we will let you know. I'd like to thank Director Costello for her efforts in getting talking and getting the bulk waste and yard waste back up and running. I think there was a lot of there was a lot of back and forth, but I think Republic needed to figure out what capabilities they had under the current situation. But I appreciate Director Costello keeping in touch with them and providing our perspective on this. I know she was in this conversation with a lot of other service directors in other communities, and they we all had a very similar message to Republic, so thank you to her. It's our understanding that most, if not all, of the items were picked up. I know I was out earlier today, and I saw a number of crews out there. Republic informed Director Costello that they had brought crews from other municipalities in here to help finish the job today. And if something was not picked up, if it's a yard waste item, we would ask that people return it, to that they remove it from the curb, and that item will be picked up next week. Yard waste will be picked up through the fall. If there's some other issues with respect to some of the items that were picked up or not picked up, you can give the service department a call at 440-356-4410. I know there was some debris that might have been falling out of some of the trucks, and I know our service department was following up on some of those calls. But if there are other items that people want to let us know about, please give them a call. Speaking of yard waste, I think now is a good time for people to consider starting a composting pile. People are at home, and it's the time of year where a lot of yard waste is generated. Not all of the yard waste ends up in a composting pile when picked up by Republic. So I appreciate people's efforts in trying to to segregate these items. I'm a brown bagger, and but in finding that not all of this waste, ends up in a composting pile, it might be, I think, again, a good time for people to consider starting a composting pile, or maybe mulching their lawn, or other ways that they can lower their yard waste production. We will be having a composting seminar. I believe it's in June. Director Costello might have the exact date. I don't have it in front of me, but we will be letting people know more about that as that date approaches. And that event will be at the community garden on Maple. The senior life department is still delivering meals from the Cleveland Food Bank. If somebody is over 60 years old and they need some meals, they can call the senior life department at 440-356-4437, and we can accommodate them. The meals can be either picked up or delivered depending on the person's preference. The rec, I've already had a question about when the Gemini Center will be open. I understand that things will be, there's talk about businesses opening up in phases. And somebody asked me when the Gemini Center, if it would be open on May 1st. It will not be open on May 1st. I can guarantee you that. We are looking into those operations when the time is right to open. I think it'll be a much different, different setup when we get started. I was on a conference call a week or so ago with the Board of Health Commissioner, and there were some people had a number of questions about their rec centers and their pools. And at that point, there really hadn't been any discussion from the governor about opening things up on May 1st. But we will all be taking direction from them and getting suggestions from them as to what we need to do. And that'll take some time to make sure that it's done properly. Again, the Gemini Center is a recreation center. It's not a boutique gym. There is, some of the gyms, it's probably easier for them to segregate things or move things around. And the Gemini, it'll be a challenge, but we'll be up to it. And as we get more direction from the governor, from the Board of Health, we will be taking those suggestions into play and making those work. Speaking of the Gemini Center, I would like to thank the members of the service department who have been doing a great job in cleaning, painting, and repairing and installing new items throughout the Gemini Center. They've done a great job, and I really appreciate their efforts there in the last few weeks. They made very good use of this time in getting things done there. And so I really appreciate that. As Commissioner Maynard mentioned last week, the building department is still open for business. They have a drop box where people can drop off applications. And I think now, again, people have a lot of time. They're at home to do maybe some home repairs or home remodeling that they've thought about in the past. And so if they want to do that, they can get a permit. They are still doing permit inspections. I know they were out, I think they had close to 50 inspections just alone last week. So if people are interested in having things done, feel free to drop off an application. And if they have questions, they can leave a message for Commissioner Maynard or Assistant Commissioner Greer. I would like to congratulate Lieutenant Mike Wickus and Officer Rich Rudd on 25 years of service to the Fairview Park Police Department over this weekend. Thank you for their commitment. And then today, Sergeant Justin Brewer and Officer Ed Mannion have reached their 22-year anniversary date, and we'd also like to congratulate them for their many years of service to the department. I'd like to thank the police for the presence throughout the community these last few weeks. I've noticed them, they're always very engaging to begin with, but now with a lot of people out and about, I see a lot of officers talking to residents, talking to kids, and I know that gives people a lot of comfort, and I really appreciate their efforts always, and especially at this time. Fire departments, they still are in Station 2 in the Senior Center. They're looking to move back to Station 1 when the conditions allow. I think they're, again, we're waiting for some direction from the governor as to when these things can take place. With respect to the service department, again, I appreciate all their efforts at the Gemini. They've been out cutting, working in the parks. There are, some of that work is weather dependent. While it might be a sunny day outside, if there was rain or something a few days before, it might make it difficult for them to cut grass. But when the opportunity arises, they're out there and they're working on the parks, and I appreciate that. They recently planted 7 trees at Nelson Russ Park, and they're in a week, next week or so, they'll be planting 20 trees along Lorraine Road, and that's in conjunction with a grant from Cuyahoga County. And I also would like to thank the Shade Tree Advisory Committee for their efforts and with regard to that grant. And I appreciate all the employees, how hard they have been working here. It's been a difficult time for everybody, but they've been coming in working hard, and we appreciate it. We've had a lot of communications from the residents, suggestions on how to do things or things that can be done. We appreciate that, and we'll try to be as responsive as we can as we hear these things. So thank you, Council President Kilbane, and I hope everybody is safe and healthy and that their families are as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cooney. Public Service and Development Director Costello.
Thank you. As the mayor mentioned, we do have the composting seminar. We had to move it back a little bit. It's scheduled for July 9th at 5:30 at the community garden. And I'd like to thank the mayor's support, the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District, who is helping us, Karen Miller, and Amy Brennan, who is doing a very good job coordinating the community garden. So that, again, that date is July 9th at 5:30. I'd also like to thank City Council. Thank you to Councilwoman King and Councilman Minnick. Thank you very much for your support in passing the construction for West 210. I'd also like to thank Monica Rossiter for all her support to secure funding for that. As we talked about in our budget hearings, we went into some detail, but we were able to use, through Monica's good efforts, $1,052,000 and $250,000 in grant funding from NOACA and the Cuyahoga County Public Works Department. So this is a really exciting time to make an improvement and using these public funds is going to be meaningful for our community. So thank you very much. And lastly, our Economic Development Microgrant Program is taking off. We've had 12 applications that we've reviewed so far. We're receiving them electronically, and we're referring 10 of those to our finance director for funding, hopefully by the end of this month. So stay tuned. I'll get a report out to everyone in that regard as we move forward. So thank you for your support.
Thank you, Director. Finance Director Singler, are you with us?
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Council President, members of City Council. We've been very busy here in the Finance Department. The audit is still continuing, although the auditors are working off-site. They're sending numerous emails and continuing to move forward with the 2019 audit. In addition to that, as you all know, we've been working on many different scenarios to provide to the mayor with respect to cost-cutting measures. I know earlier today, the mayor forwarded over to City Council the projections from the Regional Income Tax Agency. So we have a big hole to fill here, and we're working tirelessly to come up with scenarios that will cut costs here in the community and preserve our fund balances here moving forward. So that concludes my report tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council.
Thank you, Director Single. Law Director Riley, do you have anything?
I have nothing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. City Engineer McKay, do you have anything for us this evening?
Thank you, Council President Cobain. Let me just say, first of all, that it's good to hear everybody's voice and see all of you. I'm looking forward to things returning to normal as soon as possible, obviously, and hopefully maybe we're turning a corner here soon. But everybody, please be safe. And I do have a short report. We are currently bidding the West 213 water line and resurfacing project, and those bids will be opened on May 1, and we will have an update for you at that time. Thank you, and that's all I have to report tonight, Council President.
Thanks, Mike. Nice seeing you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know who's out there, but it is now time for our public session. If there's anyone out there and has any questions or comments for Council or the administration this evening. Going once, going twice. There's someone chiming in here?
No, I just unmuted everyone.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, there's a bad echo. I'm sorry. Everyone again. Okay.
All right, thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have miscellaneous business and comments from members of council now. Councilman Zimmerly.
Sure, thank you. I'd like to thank. Should I try again?
Yeah.
That's better. That's better. Yeah. Thank Judge Costello too for our hard work with Republic on getting waste and bulk pickup this week. I know I had a lot of happy residents around me for sure. Also too, wanted to thank the residents in our ward. We had a few hundred gloves dropped off at my house that we were able to donate to the senior center for delivery. So thank you to all those who stopped by over the past week for that. That's all I have.
Councilman Minnick.
Thank you. I want to thank Director Mary Kay for a great job on refuse. Never saw so many trucks in my neighborhood one day. Other than that, I have as I mentioned earlier, I have a constituent reference on email about copied the mayor in, and I'm awaiting his disposition, and Councilman Gregg has always been copied in also. That's all I have. Thank you.
So President Kilbane, if I may.
Mayor Cooney.
Thank you. Councilman Minnick, is that regarding the garbage at the the track?
It was reference to bleachers, the reference containers, the restrooms, possibility of staggered openings for Gemini.
If you'd like, I have it in front of me. I can read the exact quote of what the question is really surrounding, if you want me to.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Okay, so it's the email would like to know the logic of isolating the bleachers in the high school. It goes on to say that many people have used the steps for exercise, and blocking them off, in their opinion, is overkill. The facilities are there to help, and what good are they if we can't use them? No one's ever not maintained social distancing on the bleachers. And how about access to the porta potty at the track? And I do see that resident is tuned in here, is listening. So the floor is yours.
Thank
I
you.
emailed that resident earlier.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, there was a concern of being able to sanitize the bleachers, people using it. As it's set up now, people don't have to touch anything. They can just enter the track and leave the track without having to touch anything. If people are using the bleachers, then there's a concern about and the ability being able to sanitize it. There is a question, being exposed to the elements, whether that would necessitate the sanitizing it, but I just felt it wouldn't be a very good use of resources at this time. Both the recreation department and the service department are pretty, they're working hard. They're pretty stretched. And so that was the reasoning behind the bleachers. The porta potty, it's, again, we're talking about a sanitation issue, and I don't think that would be a good idea. We've locked all of our restroom facilities throughout the city, and to have a porta potty there, the cost related to it, making sure it's clean, making sure it's sanitized, it's just, I think it's not a good idea. So that's not something we considered. And then I did get, and I don't know if maybe it was the same person who asked about the garbage at the track. That's been removed and will be on a regular schedule going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Minnick, anything else?
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Adler, do you have anything this evening?
I really just echo the sentiments of thanking Mayor Cooney and all the directors and Mary Kay for getting our garbage addressed. Everybody's working hard in a unique situation, and it's evident, that this group truly cares about our city and doing what's best. And Mayor Cooney, you're thrown into a unique situation with a team of great people that you've put behind you, or next to you, I should say, working side by side, and your efforts are appreciated and noticed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Waring.
Can I just say ditto? Thank you to everybody in the city who's working hard under very difficult situations. I know that we say this is unprecedented a lot, but it really is, and we can really tell that you guys care about the city. You're making a lot of efforts where others perhaps might not. So I do thank the police, the fire, and the service, as well as our administration, for all of their hard work over the last couple of weeks.
And Liz.
And Liz.
Thank you. And I would agree with Councilwoman Waring that with the police, fire, and the service department, they've just been phenomenal. Thank you.
And all, Councilwoman Waring.
Yes, that's it. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Councilwoman King.
Thank you. Two things. First of all, tonight at 8:20, the Fairview High School Stadium will be turning on its lights, and they will shine brightly for the class of 2020 tonight for 20 minutes. So the class is also asking everyone to turn on their porch lights to support the class of 2020 for 20 minutes. So if everyone could please do that, that would be fantastic, because this is a really great group of kids who are kind of losing out a lot because of COVID-19. So if we could try and celebrate them as much as we can, that would be fantastic. I also would like to thank the administration and Director Costello for the garbage, and for everyone else for all their hard work during COVID-19. This is a unique situation. And as I said a couple weeks ago, this is learning. We're going to do things right and we're going to do things wrong. And we're just going to have to learn from our mistakes and keep going. So everyone just try and keep safe. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Councilman Berger.
Yeah, I just want to take a second to talk about the grant that's going around for the businesses in Fairview. And it's the city's done a great job getting the word spread on that. I, this past week and this weekend, have talked to several business owners that live in Fairview and have their businesses in Fairview. And the word on it is starting to get around. And I think the application deadline for the first round is this Thursday. But I think we could probably do a little more to spread the word on that grant because it's such a good thing. So I would just encourage anybody in the meeting or listening, tuning in, that if you know a business owner who has a business in Fairview, encourage them to, call in and seek participation in the grant, or at least that they know about it. So otherwise, everything's all good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I too would like to echo everyone else's sentiments and thank the mayor and Director Costello and the administration for all their hard work they've done for the last few weeks. Like I said to Mayor Cooney earlier, I mean, talk about trial by fire. I mean, this is it's been a difficult time, and Pat, you've done a good job, and we appreciate it, and the residents appreciate it. I also like to thank Liz for coordinating the logistics of all this video meetings. I know it's between this and setting up the executive session that I'm about to call for. It's been a lot of finagling. So thank you again, Liz. And I also like to just say I hope our residents are doing well through this this crisis. They're staying safe and well and weathering the storm, and hang in there. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. All right, the chair is assigning the topic of the Board of Control to the Local Government and Community Services Committee. And I am now, the chair is now moving to adjourn into executive session for the following reasons. Per the city charter, to consider compensation of a public employee or official under personal matters, and to prepare for, conduct, or review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. So we want to move this motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to adjourn into executive session?
Mr. Simmerly,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Adler,
Yes.
Mr. Cobain,
Yes.
Mrs. Waring,
Yes.
Mrs. King,
Yes.
Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Council is now in executive session.